We begin with scandal in Alberta as elections officials and police probe a massive privacy breach in the province. 2.9 million people are affected by this breach. That means anyone in Alberta who has cast a ballot or is even just registered to vote. Personal voter information was posted to a publicly accessible online database, including details such as full names, home addresses, and contact information. Now, the database was created by an Alberta separatist group known as the Centurion Project, a group that should not have had access to that information. Elections Alberta says the group obtained and misused a voter list that was legally provided to the Republican Party of Alberta. Now, the Centurion Project allegedly presented the database at an online meeting last month using former Alberta Premier Jason Kenney's personal information as an example. Alberta's United Conservative Party has confirmed that caucus staff attended that meeting, news that's not going over well with the province's opposition.
Anybody. It's just business as usual for this government to dox a former premier and put him at risk. The minute we knew about this breach, we called the cops. Why does the premier and her chief of staff think it's okay not to?
We know that he withheld this data because he wanted to turn it into a political stunt to play some kind of gotcha on the government, when he could have told us, April 20th, April 21st, April 22nd, or April 23rd.
Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi joins me now. Mr. Nenshi, good to see you again, sir. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, David. A big story. It's never a slow news day in Alberta.
Well, Premier Smith, who we saw there, she's making the argument is that her government needs to let the investigations by the police and Elections Alberta play out independently without government interference. Do you agree with that position she's taking?
Well, of course, we need to let the investigations continue and people should be prosecuted for this. But that said, investigations don't just magically happen. As you heard me say over there, somebody's got to call the cops. And what is astonishing, and again, I know the show is called Power and Politics, so sometimes there's politics in it. What is astonishing about this is that the Premier is blaming me for not telling her when she had a staff member in the room. So she literally had someone in the room watching Jason Kenney's personal information go up on the screen in front of a bunch of bad actors who hate Jason Kenney, and they were gleefully saying, oh, look, we even have Jason Kenney's info. And the Premier claims her staffer never told, the higher-ups never told her that she didn't know.
Right.
So if that's the case, that means that the staffer is in such a culture of unethical corruption that he thought it was okay to put Jason Kenney and 3 million Albertans at risk.
Right. You say in the room.
He did tell his boss, and his boss felt that way.
Okay, you say in the room, but it was a digital. So in the Zoom is what we're talking about here. So look, the attendance we know, but there is not evidence that I have seen that the staffer saw the presentation of the personal data or registered. Or that it registered with this person that it was illegally obtained, because the argument is that they were under the impression this was legally obtained information, right? So there's nothing to conclusively prove that this political staffer was aware of the wrongdoing or even saw the information, right?
Yeah, so they haven't denied that he saw the information. Their argument is he thought that it was legal. But here's the thing. This is not like a 19-year-old or 20-year-old staffer, you know, in a summer job. This is a guy who's been a conservative political operative for decades. He's running campaigns. He should know better. Because here's the point. Whether or not it was obtained from Elections Alberta, there is no source on earth that says, if you buy my data, if I'm a data broker, if I'm Canada Post, whoever, if you buy my data, you can just put it on the web for anybody to see. That is clearly an illegal action, regardless of where the data came from. There is no such thing as legally obtained, and a staffer with decades of experience in political dark ops needs to know that. And if he doesn't know that, then the critical question is, what else is the UCP doing?
Right. Look, and I'm not trying to say this breach isn't serious or anything. I'm just trying to put guardrails around what are established facts, because clearly some bad activity has happened here, right? That this was leaked, that it was posted, and people were exposed, and they were, you know, who knows where that could go. And certainly Jason Kenney, being a very public figure, having his address and contact information up there, there is a personal security risk to all of this. So on that point, the Centurion Project that did it, the Republican Party of Alberta that apparently had legal provenance of the list, they say they're cooperating with the investigation. The site's been taken down. What more do you want to see done right now?
Well, let's just go back to Jason Kenney for a second, David, right? Which is, when I heard that it was Jason Kenney night before last, or yesterday, first thing I did was call Jason Kenney and warn him, right? We're not exactly BFFs, but I figured he deserved to know. And what's shocking to me is that the staff members sitting through seeing Jason Kenney's name being doxxed never even thought to warn Jason Kenney, the former leader of his own party, that this was actually going on. But to your point, what do we do now? Of course, the investigation has to continue, and we should stay out of it and see what happens, but that's going to take years. But meanwhile, there's three things that need to happen right away. Number one is the government hasn't done anything to tell Albertans how to protect their data. Right? You know, when my bank has a data breach, I get an email saying, do this, do this, do this, phone these numbers. They haven't done that at all. They're really being very cavalier about this because, of course, the RCMP and the Elections Alberta investigation will take months, if not years.
Right.
So number two is Albertans deserve for the Premier to come clean on this. You know, her argument that I just didn't know when the leader of the opposition should have told me when my staff were in the room just doesn't hold water. Albertans deserve to know, does the Premier's staff always keep her in the dark? And if so, who's running the province? Or did she know and has she not be honest? The third one is the hardest one, David. What we know is that the separatists had people's home addresses and contact information while they were collecting signatures for their petition. In fact, Jeffrey Rath, one of the leaders of the Separatist Project, tweeted out in March, everybody should join the Centurion Project and get 1,000 names for your signature, for your petition. Now, that could all be above board. But what we know is that the separatist leaders had access to the information that could be used to forge the petitions. And honestly, I feel bad for the separatists out there who were busting their butts in the winter trying to get people to sign a petition if all this nefarious activity was going on in the background. And so we have to say, is this petition even valid? The separatists have said the Premier has promised them a referendum on October 19th. Whether or not the courts say it's constitutional, actually they've already said it's not.
Right.
Whether or not the Indigenous problem is solved, as she calls it, whether or not they even get their signatures. And right now, she either has to break her promise that she took when she swore to become a member of this legislature to uphold the law, or she has to break her promise to the separatists. But I don't understand how we can have this referendum in a free and fair election with all these clouds hanging over.
Well, I mean, people's choice at the ballot box will be made, you know, not based on the leak of a list. So who knows where that goes, right? Like that Elections Alberta and the police will have to come back on a few things. But help me understand the timing here. You've criticized Danielle Smith for not informing Jason Kenney, even though someone who works for that government was in the meeting. You say you did inform Jason Kenney. When did you inform Jason Kenney? Because am I correct in understanding you got this information on around April 16th, sent it to the cops on the 17th? When did you call Mr. Kenney?
Yeah, there's a couple of drips of information. So I heard about the meeting on the 17th in the morning. The meeting was on the 16th, and we called the cops immediately. We sent them an email. We followed up all those things. Just yesterday, I learned that we were able to get access to a video recording of the meeting. And in that video recording, the two things that popped up were the Premier's staff name, Mr. Andeep Sandhu's name was there, and that it was Jason Kenney they used in as an example. So as soon as I heard that, I actually left the meeting and called Jason Kenney to let him know.
Okay, so you knew about the meeting and the list in mid-April. You didn't know about the example and the exposure of Mr. Kenney's information until quite recently, and that's when you contacted him.
Yesterday or the day before. Right. I'm losing track of the days.
No,
the story keeps giving.
I appreciate that. So, but on the criticism from Premier Smith that you didn't tell the government, why did you make the? I appreciate this is probably a police and an Elections Alberta matter. But why not raise it with the government? What was your thought process there?
Well, look, it clearly is a police and Elections Alberta matter, number one. Although the Premier was found in violation of the Conflict of Interest Act because she thought she could tell Crown prosecutors who to prosecute, she actually doesn't have that power. It really is a police and elections matter. And quite frankly, David Parker, the guy who was exposing Jason Kenney's data, well, Danielle Smith went to his wedding. So really, while there's an active RCMP investigation, do you really want to tell someone who was at the guy's wedding that the guy's wedding that she went to is under investigation?
Well, yes, that would be a potentially complicating factor in the whole thing, but you can see that attack point in question period today in the legislature.
Let's get back to the title of the show, Power in Politics. You know how I love talking about politics. This is am I on the power panel again? This is the most desperate political strategy I've seen from this government. They've had a lot of them. Let's blame Nenshi for not telling us about a meeting that our own staffer was in. Whew, that is a straw that is hard to grasp.
No, and I get the politics of the whole thing, but when you raise a security concern as an officer of the legislature and all of these things, you wonder about being duty bound to inform on certain things, but it did go to the officials, it did go to the authorities. I find it interesting too that...
And let me just highlight one quick thing, David, which is, yes, certainly the 87 of us in the legislature had our own privacy breached. But I'm less concerned about that than I'm concerned about the 3 million Albertans who did. That's survivors of domestic violence, that's police officers and judges, even journalists. And frankly, they deserve to be safe too. And the RCMP needed the space to do their work.
Okay, I need to ask you one last quick question here because Jen Gerson, Alberta journalist with The Line, it's her publication. She says she tried to warn Elections Alberta about a tip she got about this potential breach, but they told her they didn't have reasonable grounds to investigate. Now, in addition to sort of lowering the bar to have a referendum, there were legislative changes to the Elections Act in your province to raise the bar for the threshold for an investigation. Did that change get in the way of this being looked into when Jen Gerson raised this?
Yeah, the chief electoral officer warned us a year ago that this bill that they put forward would severely hamper his ability to investigate. He repeated that message very candidly this week when he said that Bill 54 got in his way. The other interesting thing is just a month ago, we raised another issue with Bill 54, which is that it stopped the investigations into this guy called Sam Marash, who's at the center of a major corruption scandal here, who happens to be related to the Minister of Justice, who put that bill in place. And Elections Alberta stopped those investigations. So we warned them again that there was a problem with Bill 54. So in the House this week, I said, listen, we've got a few days left in our spring sitting. If you bring in an amendment to get rid of those changes to Bill 54 and refang Elections Alberta, whom you defanged, we'll run it through in record time. They're not interested.
Okay, there are calls, though, Mr. Nenshi, for a public inquiry into how all of this happened, and you can understand why people would be concerned about this, the chain of custody of this kind of private data. And also, let's face it, there's a double standard for political parties in this country and how they have to safeguard private data compared to, say, core government and the private sector. But it doesn't seem as if there is enough of an impetus at this point to stop the referendum from going ahead despite these various concerns. So we've seen a lot of reports about foreign interference from, like, apparently Dutch YouTubers looking to make a quick buck, out of the United States, out of Russia, people trying to pollute the information ecosystem in Alberta at this time. I mean, how confident are you that you can have a proper vote in October on the future of Alberta and Canada?
I'm actually really nervous about it. So every time we've asked the Premier about foreign interference and separatism, and there's a report out just today that suggests that there's Russian and American, I haven't read it yet, but it suggests that there's Russian and American people at play. We know about those Dutch YouTubers doing all that work. And every time I ask the Premier about it, she just waves it off and she says, it's okay, we'll require citizenship proof for people to vote, which is not at all the foreign interference that we're concerned about here. So there's a lot of things. And so I'll tell you in a very inside politics way, one of the things we've asked for is to summon the chief electoral officer before a committee of the legislature so that he can explain what he's doing, what he's worried about, how he's focused on foreign interference, and also how he's conducting his investigation. So the very beginning of your question was about a public inquiry. The chief electoral officer has a lot of the powers of a public inquiry, but we need to know if he feels comfortable using them before we go further than that.
Okay. Look, it's remarkable in the age of AI and all of these things, it's an old-fashioned leak of a voters list that's causing all of this. Naheed Nenshi, NDP leader in Alberta, we appreciate the time. Thank you, sir.
Always a pleasure, David. Thank you.